And welcome back. This will be part 2 of the long block build. Thank you. Okay, we're good. I feel better about that. Got a little bit of schmutz off of it, as you can see. It's a bit more shinier than it was before. Looks like just a bit more overspray from when they painted it, unfortunately. So let's get our oil pump back in here and see if we're still lined up. And of course we're not. We're almost lined up. There we go. There we go. So again, you may just have to fight with that to get those splines to line up. The bolts for these are a 13 millimeter. I'm gonna put a little bit of Loctite on them, get them in. We'll torque them down, and then I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So you can see we got our oil pump installed and torqued. The torque sequence on that, in case you're curious, per the book, is upper left, lower right, and then lower left, and then upper right. So it's standard kind of cross pattern. And they were once again calling for 21 foot-pounds for the oil pump bolts. So we've got that in there. The next piece that we can do, I was thinking, I might change gears a bit. I'm going to look and see how long this video has been, and this may get chopped into a part 1, and then I'll start part 2 next, depending on how long this is. But I think the next piece that we could do, since everything is in place, well, not everything's in place for it. We still got to put the front timing cover on, which we're not ready to do that yet, because we want to get the cylinder heads on, lifters, and all the accompanying hardware so we can test spin this and verify everything looks good, and then we'll finally put our oil pan in. So let's do that next. We'll get to work on putting the MDS block plugs in and the lifters and such. That may be in a part 2. Again, just depending on how long this is, because what I'm doing is I'm recording all the segments to do the full long block, and then I'll cut it up if it gets too big into 2 videos, or it may just end up being one big video. I'm not quite sure yet. But anyway, the next piece that we'll cover is that we'll go ahead and get the MDS block off plugs in, and then we'll get the lifters in and start looking at the heads. And I'll bring you back in a bit. Bye. Oh, sorry. One last item on the timing. When you got your timing set and you haven't moved it, so we still have our timing mark there, that's good. We got the timing mark that's now behind the oil pump, that's good. Another item to look at is look at the keyway of the crank gear on the crank. You notice when everything is in time, that keyway is what? Probably about the 230 position or so. You can kind of see where it's sitting. Again, it's just another guide you can use to verify that you've got the crank in the right spot in relation to the cam. As long as you can see, as long as you know that you got that pointing up and in the right spot on the chain, and at least for the initial timing, you can kind of also look at that keyway as well. In case you're doubting it, after you've put the pump on, maybe you had a sleepless night, you're like, oh, I'd like to check that bottom crank again without having to take the pump off. Like I said, you can borescope behind it, or you can just look at that keyway there. But cool. Okay, I'll bring you back for the next piece. Thank you much. Bye. And welcome back. So just in the process of putting our MDS block off plugs in place, because again, we're doing an MDS delete on this particular motor. And in case you're curious, that's your part number. So what I'm doing here is just getting them in place. I do need to look up the torque spec on these. I don't have it off the top of my head. But in order to get them in, I'm just taking a little bit of standard engine oil, as you can see there, and just putting them in on these O-rings to help ease the install. lining one up, drop it in the hole. You'll see that metal, there it goes, that's the first lip. Now it's not seated all the way, as you can see. It's still, this metal tab is not down to the engine block. I tried pushing these in by hand, but they need a little bit more grunt to get them to seat. So what I've been doing is the same socket that fits the bolt, which is a 10mm, just putting it over the top of the block off plug, a little rubber mallet, and just giving it some light taps to help it seat itself. There it goes. Okay, yep. Our tab is all the way to our block. Beautiful. Kind of heard it just kind of pop into place. And then we'll do the same for the remainders. So I'll show you another one of these, and then I'll cut the camera and bring you back. And yes, that is loose. That little metal tab they have on there for the mounting bolt, you know, it's not fixed. It's got a nice little jingle to it. So it would be this, these would be the same block off plugs used in a Hemi. If you happen to have a manual transmission, my understanding is manual transmissions do not have MDS. There we go, beautiful. That's now seated. Like I said, it just takes a little bit to get that O-ring to kind of push over the edge, which is why I'm putting a little bit of engine oil on, just to help ease the process. And the actual MDS solenoids themselves, getting them out is almost about the same. If you have the MDS solenoids and you're having trouble getting them out of the block, what you can do is take a rubber mallet like this, and I did this during the teardown video. If you want to go watch the sections where we did the teardown of this before it went to the machine shop. If you take a rubber mallet like this and just pop the top of each one of the MDS solenoids, get it to break that seal, and generally they'll come out without breaking. Okay. Now let's get our socket on there. There we go. So that metal clasp sound that you're hearing is this piece hitting the block when that plug finally seats. So I've got you on a tripod that's at an angle, and I've also got you zoomed in as far as it'll go. Hopefully you're getting a good shot of the inside valley. And again, I'm just going hand tight on these. And then I'll look up the torque spec and come back and torque them. I have never heard of these bolts backing themselves out, so I'm not going to Loctite them. They weren't Loctited from the factory. But to make the argument, neither were the oil pump bolts or any of the timing hardware, but I have seen timing hardware back out. That's why I Loctited those. Okay, so with these installed, let's see. The next piece that we can do is getting the lifters in, and I'll get you down a little bit lower and get you repositioned, and then we can take care of that. But I'm going to go look up the torque specs on these first, so we can go ahead and get those torqued before we move on, and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So the bolts for the MDS solenoids were 97 inch-pounds, or according to the torque wrench, I believe when it converted that to foot-pounds, 8.08 foot-pounds. So not a lot of torque on those bolts. So we got one set of our lifters here. Now remember, on this particular build, we're deleting the MDS, so we're going to go in with all non-MDS lifters. And just like when we did the parts review, if you remember, these are what individuals call quote-unquote Hellcat lifters. And what they are is just an updated non-MDS lifter. And hopefully you can see that. But you can actually just kind of see that you can actually see the beefy, bigger needle bearings that are inside of this lifter. So what I've got here is just a set of 4. And just like when we do our normal builds, these come quite well oiled from the factory, but again, going to use a little bit of our assembly lube, slather down these lifters, and get these bad boys installed. Or girls. Doesn't all have to be boys. I don't want to drip any of that down the cylinder wells. So what I'm doing here, hopefully you can see that, I'm just squirting a little bit inside between the roller and the lifter and putting a little bit of this on the lifter body. And again, just kind of smearing it around, making a big old mess of things. There you go. You can see they're thoroughly well snotted up. Let's go ahead and put in our first bank of 4, shall we? There we go. They're in. We'll get that, once we get them all in, we'll get them torqued. And it calls for 106 inch-pounds of torque on this lifter kind of holder bracket, or this yoke, I'm sorry, as it's called. So not a lot of torque on those either. So I'll show you one more of those, and then we'll drop out of the, I'll pause you for a second just so you don't have to watch me put in, the remaining 8. In case I didn't say it during the parts review, these are 100% Mopar OEM lifters. There's a lot of aftermarket lifters out there for Hemi. You are welcome to use those if you see fit for your motor. Just be careful about what you're getting and watch your application. I believe Modern Muscle Extreme on YouTube did a very nice comparison at the time of all the available aftermarket lifters for a Hemi, and showed the kind of the pros and cons and the differences of them and why they don't use some of them, so on and so forth. It was a nice comparison video. I encourage you to look it up. I'll link it in the description as well in case you're curious. Okay, so we got these all nice and snotted up with our cherry syrup. You kind of just have to get them lined up, and once you get them lined up, they'll push in place. But remember, you're dealing with the machined parts, so they'll only line up one way and go in one way. Again, the nice thing about the MDS lifters is that we don't have to worry about making sure that we get the MDS lifters in the MDS solenoids. I'm sorry, getting the MDS lifters in the correct bores for the designated cylinders that are part of MDS, the ones that the PCM would normally shut down, since we're removing that aspect of it. Okay, so that's these two. I'm going to go get the other two on the other side. And like I said, I'll get them torqued and I'll bring you back. But once again, the torque on that bolt, per the documentation here, is 106 inch-pounds for these yoke holders. Or I should say yokes. I'll bring you back in a bit. One moment. And welcome back. So you can see that we got our yokes or our lifters torqued in and marked per our standard that we've been doing. And over here, we're just taking a little extra time since we have it and just doing a quick leak check. So I've got some old spark plugs plugging up each cylinder right now, and added a little, normal 4-cycle fuel. And in this case, it's the ethanol-free True Fuel. Just looking for something thin, something that would normally be present in the cylinder head, and put a little bit of liquid into each of the 8 cylinders that you see here, and just want to make sure that we don't see any drippage coming out of the intake or the exhaust. We shouldn't, because remember that we lapped all of these. And the reason why I'm testing this, now the machine shop said the cylinder heads were fine, but again, I'm just being kind of paranoid here and taking the opportunity to check while we can, because you remember we still had the misfire on cylinder 1 at idle and cylinder 7 at high idle. And so that would be this head that you see here, which would go on the driver's side. So this would be the back. So this would be 1, 3, 5, and 7. So I just want to make sure that we don't see any leakage out of 1 or 7 on this while we have it. And so far they're looking good. That one's been holding fluid now for probably about 10-15 minutes. I'm going to give this one probably about another 5 minutes, and then we'll get all this fuel drained off of them and start to clean up the mating surface here, as well as start to clean up the mating surfaces here, and prep to get these heads installed. Yeah, we'll probably put the heads on without, actually no, we can do that. We'll see about putting the exhaust. No, I'll do it without. Yeah, we'll get the heads installed on and get them torqued down and get them ready without the exhaust manifolds, and then we'll hang the exhaust manifolds on after the fact once we get all the upper end stuff taken care of. So again, we're gonna get these cleaned up, get them prepped. We want to get our mating surfaces prepped, and what I'll do is I'll just take a little shop towel, a little bit of brake clean. Now you see some dark areas in here, and what that is, that's just staining from the old gasket. I don't see any overspray of paint onto the cylinders, so they look good. Before we put the heads in, I'll take the opportunity and just kind of wipe the cylinders down one last time with a little bit of standard engine oil, just a kind of a light coat of engine oil, just to help protect things. And then I'll bring it back, but I'm going to let these soak and bring it back in a bit. Bye. And welcome back. So you can see that we've got this is the driver's side head on the block or on the bench right now. We're going to do a little bit, we're going to do some valve relapping. In the liquid test you saw us do earlier, this was seeping pretty good from, well, not pretty good, but enough of a seep you could see it kind of puddle up a little bit underneath the intake and a little bit out of the exhaust. So we're going to lap both sides of these. So that means I went ahead and remove the valve stem seals just so they don't get, just because Usually when you lap these, you normally don't want these seals in there because the side-to-side motion or the twisting motion isn't kind of what these seals are meant for. So we had extra seals. I went ahead and pulled them out. You can see I've got the valves out here. Just used our tool, and you've seen me do this before, but what I'm going to do is lap these in a little bit more, get everything cleaned up, get it reassembled, and then we're going to do our same liquid test because the other cylinders in this head were fine after the fact. We were able to, I didn't see any accumulation or any type of moisture or anything forming. Only one on this head was just this one cylinder. So we had one cylinder in each head. So this is the, again, driver side. So this would have been cylinder 1, aka the cylinder that we were having compression issues with, was leaking a little bit. And on the passenger head, it was I think cylinder 2. Yes, cylinder 2 on the passenger head is going to have a little bit more work done to it. Now, I did drop these off at the machine shop, and they did check them out, and they did pass their inspection. I have to call them up to see if that was a pressure. I'm assuming they did a pressure test on these. Now, to be fair, when I pressure tested these after reassembling the top of the engine the first time, it was getting pressure in the cylinder. So, and the liquid that I put into that you saw earlier, it took a good 10-15 minutes before it kind of started finding its way through and opening to get past that. So I don't think it was a leak enough in the sense that it would have bothered anything in the cylinder when it was running or as far as compression. But since it was leaking noticeably versus the other ones, we're going to go ahead and lap it and take care of it while we have the opportunity to do it. You know, no good a time as now. And of course, this is what I'm using here. Same stuff I used before. You just want to be careful that when you get done with this, that you thoroughly clean all that grit out, because you don't want that valve lapping compound inside this head, or floating around the engine, I should say. So I'm going to work on this, and I'll bring you back. Thank you much. So I figured I'd give you a quick shot of this. That's the intake valve. I just lapped it a couple of times. In other words, went through a couple of motions, dropped some fresh valve lapping compound on it, and kind of went through a couple motions a few more times, and you can see a nice pronounced ring, gray ring in there where the valve is making contact, and it corresponds now with this ring here. So it has a much more pronounced ring around it now than what it did when I took them out. And to show you that, I haven't done this one yet, but this is the exhaust side for that cylinder. You can see a little bit of a ring in there, but it's kind of faint. So I'm going to go through the same process on this one, and then we should see a vast improvement over where it's going to sit and also the valve itself. So let me get to this one, lapped a little bit, and then I'll bring you back. Thank you much. And welcome back. So hopefully you can see that there now. You can see a much more pronounced ring, gray ring, as well as on the valve seat, on the valve stem seat itself, or I should say valve itself. There's the valve seat. So that was, again, just kind of about maybe minute or so of twisting motion. And I'll show you this when I go do the next one so you can kind of understand what I'm getting at. And then cleaned everything off, put some fresh compound on it, and again, in a few more moments, or a few more minutes that way as well. So I'm going to go ahead and reassemble this, put some fresh valve stem seals on this one, put the springs and everything back in, and then we'll set this one up with another liquid test, and hopefully we've fixed the leak. And I'll bring it back in a bit. Bye. And welcome back. So I just want to kind of show you what I'm doing here. Is that this is the passenger cylinder head that we have up right now. And it was the number 2 cylinder, which would be this one here, because this is the intake facing us. And before I take these valves out, remember this one was one of the ones that I commented earlier when we were doing the liquid test was leaking. So I'm going to just take an extremely bright LED flashlight. You're probably not going to be able to see this, but you see a little glint of light down in there? See, is it going to adjust to it? But what it's picking up on, what you're seeing there is the reflection off the valve stem. Yeah, camera's not going to be sensitive enough, I don't think, to pick this up. But I could see a little glint of light right at the top corner of this valve stem. So right in here, I can see a little bit of light coming through, which obviously we don't want that. And I've already checked the other ones and I don't see light. Remember, the other ones passed the liquid test, but I went ahead and used the flashlight anyway. And I don't see the same issue with these that I do this one. So what I'm going to do is just use our spring compression tool here. And I've got videos on the other channel that show me doing this when we did the 2500 as well as when we did the first rebuild on these. Snagged my charging wire. So what I'm going to do is just decompress these springs, get the springs, keepers, and everything out, and the shims. I'm going to take the valve seals out and just replace those. But then when I get ready to do the lapping process again, I'll bring you back, and then we'll go over this. But let me get this disassembled, and I'll bring you back in a bit. Bye. And welcome back. So I got you on a little tripod on the desk here. Looks a little smudged. Get you cleaned up here. There we go. And what I'm doing is, again, I've got the valve seal out at this point in time so I can rotate the valve like this. I've got a little bit of lapping compound just on the edge of that valve. And this has been round 2. So every couple of turns, I'm just picking it back up and tapping it to get that compound to reseat, because you'll hear that tone change when it stops, that more coarse grinding sound. Like that right there, you'll notice it's kind of changed sounds. So just tap. Okay, so now I'm just going to get a fresh paper towel here and clean off the lapping compound, both from the valve and from the valve seat. You can see that ring on that valve. Don't worry about the spark plugs. Yes, I know I left spark plugs in here. That's just an old set that I'm just using, that we used when we did the liquid test, just so it would seal off the combustion chambers. Okay, so we got that one nice and cleaned up and much more visible. That was the exhaust valve, so we're going to do the same thing to it. You can kind of see the line there, but it's pretty faint. And the reason why we did this the first time to this engine is that we replaced all of these valves. So we went through and lapped them to basically get the new valves to marry and mesh and kind of wear together, if you want to call it that as well, with the valve seats that were in it. Now, I didn't have the machine shop go through and replace any of the valve seats or the valves because we had already done that. Again, I'm not quite sure what their inspection entailed, whether it was a pressure inspection or not. And to be perfectly honest with you, me doing this may not be necessary,
Because it did take, like I said, quite a bit of time for that liquid to leak through, but I wouldn't think it should have leaked through at all. Especially when I got the really bright flashlight and shone through it and tried to show you that on the intake valve again, that little area, little corner right here on the intake valve, you can see just the faintest glint of light coming through it. Suction cup keeps deciding it doesn't want to stick. These valves have a coating on them. Okay. So now that I've run that one through a couple of courses, again, I'm just going to clean the old grit off, apply some new, and then go through that motion a few more times. I can already see that we've got a more pronounced line on that valve seat than what we had before. Show you what I'm doing here. Just using an acid brush with some of this lapping compound and just putting a fair bit right on that edge where it seats into the valve seat. You hear that grinding get significantly lighter, and then as I pick it up and tap it, it gets more coarse. So once again, I'm just going to wipe off the old compound. Switch over to a fresh towel here. Making sure I get all of that old grit out of there. Hopefully you can see that now, that that's got a lot more pronounced groove on it, or wear spot where that compound was at, than what it had before. Okay. Now, what I need to do next is flip it over and get the valve stem seals reinstalled. And what I like to do is just take just a little bit of just standard motor oil, squirt it on that little tower that valve stem seal seats onto. Press it in place a little bit by hand just to get it started. And then you can take this is a 12 millimeter socket, and it'll hit right on that seal. And where it'll end up is right on that lip of that seal, giving you a nice place to kind of drive this home. And you're going to hear a tone change when this valve stem seal bottoms out. Hopefully you heard that. You should have heard it change to a much more metallic type ting. And again, I'm just tapping it. I'm not hitting this with a lot of force. Okay, there we go. Doing a few more for good measure. Flip our head back around. Let's switch over to a new towel. And we'll wipe these down again just to make sure that we're getting all that old grit out of there. And since we have a valve stem seal in here now, I'm going to take a little bit of motor oil. And just coat the stem. Because you'll feel this when you hit that valve stem seal, when you go to put this in. Like that's the seal. It's hitting the seal. So if I like to rock them from left to right a little bit and just slowly give it some pressure. And you'll feel it clear the top of that valve. Okay. The reason why I'm pulling that back out that was a little bit rough. What I want to do is put a little bit more lubrication. There we go. That's better. Yeah, much better. Much better. Okay, do the same thing to our exhaust. And right there's the seal. So again, just kind of take it, wiggle it from side, kind of turn it from side to side. I'm going to do the same thing to this one. So it was a little bit rough. It is a new valve stem seal as well. There we go. Yeah, much happier. Okay, now that we have both our stems in, what I like to do is just take a little brick of folded up Post-it notes, put it right there inside of our center of our combustion chamber. So set our head down, and then that way that'll help hold those valves up so they don't slip down on us. And then from here, it's just a matter of putting our springs and everything back in with our spring compressor. I'm not going to bore you with that. I've got other videos on my channel that show the exact same process. So let me get these valves in, and I'll bring you back. Thank you much. And welcome back. So we've got our reassembly done. I did check it with a flashlight. I no longer see that little glint of light over here in the far corner that we were seeing when we did a really bright flashlight through here and then looked at through the corresponding intake. Went ahead and looked at all the other rest of the intakes and the rest of the exhaust on the cylinder head just to make sure it wasn't, you know, obviously light leaking through. Again, they did pass the liquid test, so we're going to retest this cylinder on this one and the corresponding fix on the other cylinder head. Now, to be fair, did these need to be lapped to fix it? It could have just been carbon or other dirt that the lapping compound helped to clean that seat up. But in this, in this case, it's clean. It looks a lot better than what it did. And like I said, we're going to retest this and make sure that's taking care of it. And we'll go on from there. So let me set this up for a retest and I'll bring you back. Thank you much. And welcome back. So you can see what I'm doing here just for a quick test is I'm just keeping the cylinder head up and level. We've got spare unused spark plugs plugged in. And I've just got each of the combustion chambers filled up full of water. So I'm going to let this set and come back. And all I'm looking for is to verify that the water obviously stays at the same level that it's at now. You know, and obviously doesn't drop away completely and disappear. As long as it doesn't, then we should be good. I tested this cylinder head first. You know, filled it up full of water. Let it sit there for a good, probably about 30-40 minutes, and it didn't leak. And then just got an air gun out and blew all the water out of it just so it wasn't sitting in here. And I'm going to come in here with a little bit of WD-40 once this is done and just kind of wipe these areas down a little bit just to help protect it, because, you know, your valves are steel versus the rest is aluminum. I just don't want any rust to form in any areas. But like I said, the good news is this one did pass, sitting like it was. It didn't drop the water level any, and the ports themselves, you know, were dry. So we should be good. Yeah. Yeah, that's just water that got spilt when it was running around. Beautiful. Okay, so I'm going to continue to, just like I said, spray, just run some more compressed air over this one to make sure that we've got all the excess water blowing out of this. And then we're going to keep an eyeball on that one and see if it drains out any. And with that being said, I'll bring you back in a bit. Bye. And welcome back. So we've had our water sitting here, and I haven't seen much of a drop, with the exception of there's a couple of drops of water coming out of this exhaust valve here on this side. Another thing that I'm going to do, I can pinpoint it and I'll show it to you. Watch this. I'm going to shoot a little compressed air into that valve right there. You have to forgive the hiss, but you can see, there it is. You can see it leaking on that edge. So yeah, we still have an issue with the number 8 exhaust valve not sealing correctly. So far, all the intakes on this one look okay. I'm going to shoot a little compressed air in there, but I don't see anything dripping out of the rest of these. They all look dry. So I'm going to try to tackle the number 8's exhaust valve on this one and see if we can fix it. It may need just a little bit more polishing to get it to come around. Now, it's not a huge leak, and truth be told, I expect there to be a little bit of seepage just due to the amount of age that's on these cylinder heads, because when the machine shop had it, they just did an inspection on them. You know, they didn't put new valve seats and stuff in it.
But what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the water pulled. I'm going to shoot some air in the intake side of it just to verify nothing's wrong there. And then I'm going to get the water out of this, blow everything dry, and then take apart that number 8 exhaust valve and see if we can polish it enough to finally get it to seal. And I'll bring you back. So let me get to work on this, and I'll let you know how it goes. Thank you much. Well, got some bad news. It's not leaking in the sense that if the water sits here, but if I blow some compressed air from the other side, every one of these intake valves are showing some type of seepage on one side or the other. Now, that may be perfectly normal just due to the age of the head, but let me show you an example here. So you can see that nice bit of bubbling there. And as I move around to the edge, there's even more. So you can see as I moved around to the edge there, it had a you know, a fair bit of bubbling. Yeah, I mean, but it's dry. So the only thing I could think to do at this point is to send them back to the machine shop, or perhaps give them a call on Monday when they're open and say, hey, this is what I'm seeing. I mean, obviously having water drip out of this one is going to be bad, but before I play with these any further, I want to get their take on it, because they may just both have to go back to the machine shop and have those valve seats redone. Now, again, with the amount of age that's on this particular set of cylinder heads, I expect some leakage, and that may be perfectly normal. Now, if the machine shop reworks the cylinder heads, then obviously I would expect zero leakage at that point. But like I said, all of these, to an extent, like that, even that one right there, you can see it. If you get it in the right spot, it's just a little bit of bubbling, and they all do it. Now, the exhaust valves, when I hit them up with a little bit of compressed air, this one was the only one that was leaking, and the other 3 were sealed. So that's the only thing I could think to do at this point. I definitely don't want to take the chance and reassemble it and run into an issue. So with that being said, I guess this is just going to be part 1 at this point, and we're just going to be on kind of high speed hold until I can hear back from the machine shop. Like I said, they may come back and say, you know, it's perfectly normal when they reevaluate it. Like I said, they did evaluate these, and they did tell me that they were good. I need to find out from them exactly what that evaluation entailed. You know, was it a pressure test? Did it pass a pressure test? Because again, and I hate to keep repeating this, I'm sorry, but my understanding is just due to the age of the vehicle, you know, there's gonna be some kind of seepage. They're not factory new, and what I'm seeing here may be 100% normal, but you know, they're not open on weekends, so I'm kind of on hold until I can find out from there, unless one of you in the audience can tell me if this is 100% normal or not. But for now, I'm gonna get the water out here. I'm gonna blow all this stuff dry, and I'll bring you back for the next one. And if you haven't subscribed already, please consider doing so. As you can see, we're making progress in finally getting our long block assembled. We did get the cam, the phaser, the timing components, the lifters are installed, and the MDS block off plugs are installed, but we're going to be on hold until we can find out what's going on with our heads here. With that being said, I'll let you go, and I'll bring you back for the next one. Oh, if you haven't considered subscribing, please consider doing so. It does help to grow the channel. The the bigger we can make the channel, the more resources and opportunities become available to us to continue to do stuff like this. But have no fear. I'll let you know how things go, and I'll chat at you later. Thank you much. Bye.